Now, President Obama sometimes doesn't want to acknowledge that the terrorism we face here in America is almost always radical Islamic terrorism. Fox News gets on him for this, conservatives do, but he's got to realize it, and maybe he'll realize it now that it's hit home. Well, it turns out a terrorist was looking to assassinate President Obama. Amazing story. He said, I don't want to annihilate anybody. I want to fucking change America. Look at ISIS guys coming to change America, man. See, actually, some of the conservatives did warn us about this. They said ISIS would come to change us, right? But it gets much worse. He said, if you had contact with the people that you say you had contact with, I could kill the President of the United States. He told this to an informant. I could kill the President of the United States, and then we storm Washington, and then we take over the country. Well, there it is. Oh my God. Islamic terrorism, ISIS is coming to take over the country. They're going to kill our president. And he still won't say Islamic radicals. Let us call it what it is. What? Oldest trick in the book, right? I'm getting word that it's not an Islamic terrorist. That it's actually a right-wing terrorist working with the Aryan Nation. Oh. His name is Cameron Stout. He's of Stover, Missouri. So that terrorist, who is not being called a terrorist by anyone, even though he came to take over the country and wanted to kill our president, is actually a guy who is a right-winger and a white nationalist. Why is he not a terrorist? Of course he is, right? Isn't it amazing? Almost no story calls him a domestic terrorist. Now, as I told you, same exact quotes. The quotes I read for were actually, of course, from Cameron Stout. If it was a Muslim, you'd be saying, "Oh my God, it'd be all over the news. Oh, we found an ISIS guy who was going to assassinate the president. You see, we knew it. The radicals, the Islam. Why won't he call it?" So I got a question for the rest of the media. I got a question for Fox News. Why won't you call this guy a right-wing terrorist? Why won't you call him a white nationalist terrorist? Why won't you do that? Why won't you call evil by its name? Here's more from Talking Points memo about Stout. Stout told the informant in a conversation on Saturday he had researched locations from which to shoot Obama at the White House and the church that the president attends, according to the affidavit. Now, obviously, this guy is quite serious. This is not just said in passing. He's telling him, former member of Aryan Nation, it was an amusing part of the story and an otherwise terrible story about terrorism, that he had first met the guy and apparently did something along the lines of flipping him off. Then they got into a fight, and after they scuffled for a while, they both realized that they were white racist pricks and got along and wound up having dinner. Now, the Aryan Nation guy's girlfriend winds up recording the conversation. That's how we find out his very specific plots to kill the president. So now more on that. Stout also allegedly drew diagrams of D.C. for the informant, who gave them to law enforcement. So obviously, he's thought this through. He's thinking about how to carry it out. This is pretty specific. Furthermore, he also allegedly researched wind speeds in Washington and the type of weapon he would need to carry out the plot. Well, now this is incredibly specific at this point. And then he switched over to talking about killing him in Kansas. He said on Tuesday, an undercover officer purporting to be an Aryan Nation leader met with the informant and Stout to discuss the assassination plot, according to the affidavit. Stout said that during the meeting that he planned on shooting Obama during the president's next visit to Kansas City, Missouri, and asked the undercover officer for transportation to Kansas City. So now, here's a guy who has made plots in Washington and in Kansas City to kill him. It is very specific plots. Again, if it was an Islamic radical who had made these plots, it would be all over the news. Oh my God, they had specific plans to assassinate our president in 2 different cities. Now, ironically, his lawyer has decided that he's going to use that as a defense. Listen to what he says. Stout's lawyer, Troy Stabenow, has not yet met with Stout, but noted that Stout contradicted himself by describing plots in both Washington, D.C. and Kansas City, Missouri. He's like, see, he couldn't be guilty because he's planning to kill him in 2 different cities. I'm not sure that's a good defense. I might want to think about that. On the other hand, once he does meet Stout, he'll find out that Stout himself is also a little contradictory, because Stout has also said, quote, that nigger shouldn't be president. Now, remember, this is recorded, and he doesn't know he's being recorded. It's recorded by the informant, right? Then he went on to say, quote, Some of my best friends have been niggers. Isn't that funny? You got a white racist talking to a former member of the Aryan Nation who happens to be an informant. He doesn't know he's an informant. And they're having a conversation. But even in the midst of that conversation, they're talking about killing the black president, partly because he is black and he wants to shoot that, quote, nigger, right? Even he says in the middle of the dinner, don't get me wrong, some of my best friends are niggers. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that amazing? I bet if you asked him, he'd say, oh, me? No, I'm not racist. I just told you some of my best friends are those guys. Keep that in mind next time somebody tells you, no, some of my best friends are black. So I couldn't have possibly said anything racist. All right, but the bottom line is a very serious one, which is here was a guy who made very specific plans to assassinate the president that would definitely qualify under the definition of terrorism. And yet no one calls him that. Right? And you know it, even if you're against me, you know that if he was Islamic, if he was ISIS, not only would it be the biggest news story in the country, but Fox News would be screaming right now at the president, who was going to be the victim of this plot, why won't you call it by its name? It's Islamic, it's Islamic. Well, in this case, it's white, it's right wing, it's right wing. And I think it's Christian, it's Christian. I don't think Christian is a defining part of this, but he is most certainly right-wing and a white supremacist. That is defining, and no one's yet called him a terrorist.